What if I told you that long before Adam was formed from clay, long before Genesis was written, long before any religion you know existed, there was an African titan who was already creating life through the power of word and thought? What if I revealed to you that this story not only existed, but was systematically erased from the records, because it proves that Africa was the cradle not only of physical humanity, but of human spirituality? We are talking about Ptah, the primordial architect of the universe, the creator god of ancient Egypt, whose stories are at least 2,000 years older than the biblical accounts of creation. I'm not talking about mythology or legend. I'm talking about spiritual traditions documented in stone, preserved on papyrus, engraved in temples that still exist today, but which have been deliberately ignored because they challenge narratives that portray Africa as culturally inferior. Ptah was not just another god in a confusing pantheon of Egyptian deities. Ptah was the god, the primordial creator who brought everything into existence through the power of his word. Sounds familiar? It should, because this story directly influenced all subsequent accounts of divine creation, including those that have come down to us through Judeo-Christian traditions. But here's what will shock you. Ptah didn't create through physical force or arbitrary magic. He created through conscious thought, through vibration, through what ancient texts call the word of the heart. These are concepts that modern quantum physics is only beginning to understand, that consciousness and vibration can literally influence material reality. Imagine discovering that 5,000 years ago, African scientist priests already understood principles of creation and manifestation that we are rediscovering now. Imagine realizing that while other cultures were still developing basic agriculture, Africans had already developed sophisticated understandings of how consciousness interacts with matter to create reality. And imagine discovering that this wisdom was systematically suppressed not because it was primitive, but because it was too advanced. Because recognizing that Africans developed the world's earliest and most sophisticated spiritualities would shatter narratives of cultural superiority that justified centuries of slavery and colonization. Over the next few minutes, we will uncover archaeological evidence that proves not only the historical existence of Ptah, but the extraordinary sophistication of the civilization that worshipped him. We will examine texts that are older than any book of the Bible, but contain insights into creation and spirituality that are more advanced than many contemporary traditions. Let's understand how Ptah's story was deliberately erased during the colonial period, how European museums still keep evidence of this African genius hidden in their storage, and how academics still resist giving ancient Egypt the credit it deserves for its fundamental contributions to human spirituality. But more importantly, we will discover how reclaiming this ancestral wisdom can transform our understanding of who we are, where we come from spiritually, and what our potential is as conscious creators of our own reality. Because ultimately, this isn't just about ancient history, it's about power. The power of knowing that you carry within your spiritual DNA the oldest and most sophisticated creation traditions on the planet. The power of understanding that long before any organized religion existed, your African ancestors had already mapped out the deepest mysteries of existence. And perhaps, just perhaps, reclaiming that connection with Ptah, the first creator, the original architect, is exactly what we need to remember our own power of creation in a world that has taught us to feel small and powerless. Prepare to discover that you come from a lineage of cosmic titans. Before we delve into this discovery that will revolutionize your understanding of the origins of human spirituality, I need you to do something fundamental. If you feel you are about to discover a truth that has been hidden because it is too powerful, if you realize that we are entering territory that can transform your understanding of your own spiritual origins, then leave your like now. This shows that you have the courage to question narratives that have been imposed on us and that you are ready to rediscover ancestral wisdom that is rightfully yours. Subscribe to the channel and activate the bell, because what we are going to reveal today about Ptah is just the beginning of a journey to recover African knowledge that has been systematically suppressed. You won't want to miss a single moment of this rediscovery that can awaken creative powers you didn't even know you possessed. Let's begin our investigation with an archaeological discovery that should have changed everything we know about the origins of human spirituality, but which has been systematically downplayed because its implications are too revolutionary for the academic establishment to tolerate. In 1925, archaeologists working in Memphis, the ancient capital of Egypt, discovered a library of stone texts known as the Memphite theology, documents dating back to at least 2700 BC, but preserving much older traditions about Ptah, the primordial creator. To put this into perspective, these creation texts are at least 200 years older than the earliest biblical writings. We are talking about a sophisticated theology of creation that existed when Abraham wasn't even born, when the Hebrews were still nomadic tribes, when most of humanity was still discovering how to cultivate grains. But here's what should have shocked the world. These texts don't describe a primitive creation through brute force or divine whim. They describe a sophisticated process where Ptah creates through hu, authoritative word, and essia, perception or knowledge. In other words, creation through informed awareness, through focused intention, through what we would today call conscious manifestation. The Memphite theology specifies that Ptah conceived in his heart everything that would come into existence and spoke with his tongue everything he wished to materialize. Not only that, but the text explains that after he spoke the names of all things, they came into existence. This is a sophisticated understanding of the creative power of language and consciousness that predates any similar tradition by millennia. And there's more. The text describes Ptah creating not only physical objects, but ka, what we would translate as soul or vital essence. Ptah not only forms bodies, but breathes consciousness into them. He not only creates matter, but organizes that matter into conscious living systems. This is an understanding of life and consciousness that is surprisingly sophisticated for any period in history. But here's where it gets disturbing. When these texts were discovered and translated in the early 20th century, they were classified as interesting mythology and relegated to obscure Egyptology departments. There was no global celebration that the oldest known creation theology had been discovered. There was no recognition that Africans had developed concepts of creative consciousness that are more advanced than many contemporary traditions. Why not? The answer is uncomfortable but obvious. Because recognizing the extraordinary sophistication of these ancient African traditions would destroy narratives about cultural development that have been used to justify colonization and slavery. If Africans were developing advanced philosophies about consciousness and creation 5,000 years ago, it would make absurd the claim that Africa was culturally backward and needed to be civilized by Europeans. But let's delve deeper into the mystery. Ptah was not seen merely as an abstract cosmic creator. He was understood as the active architect of the universe, constantly involved in processes of creation and renewal. The texts describe Ptah as he who made everything and created the gods, the heart and tongue of the 9 gods, he who gave life to all the gods and their cause. We live in extremely difficult times in which prophecies are marked, but many still do not realize what is happening in the world. For this, I have made my ebook available to reveal the apocalypse, which you can download immediately through the first set of comments. This book will help you uncover all the mysteries of the apocalypse and transform your life. Go to the first set of comments to get your copy, as very little remains and will be removed soon. Don't waste time, click now, and secure your digital copy. And don't forget to get your Reveal the Apocalypse ebook. It is very important that you buy it quickly before the copies run out. This means that Ptah was understood as the source not only of physical creation, but of divinity itself. Other gods were emanations or aspects of Ptah, not independent entities competing for supremacy. This is sophisticated monotheism disguised as apparent polytheism, an understanding that all divine diversity emerges from a unitary source. And there's a fascinating practical dimension to this. Ptah wasn't worshipped merely through passive rituals, but through active imitation. Followers of Ptah were taught that they too possessed divine creative abilities, that they too could manifest reality through conscious word and focused intention. The religion of Ptah was fundamentally about human empowerment, not about submission to external authority. This is the opposite of the hierarchical religions that emerged later, where divinity exists to be appeased and humanity exists to be controlled. The tradition of Ptah taught that humans are co-creators with the divine, possessing responsibility and the capacity to consciously participate in the processes of universal creation. Even more fascinating, texts describe specific techniques that followers of Ptah use to manifest changes in material reality. It wasn't arbitrary magic, but methodologies based on an understanding of how consciousness interacts with energy to influence matter. They were proto-spiritual scientists experimenting with what we now call the mind-matter interface. But here is the most disturbing aspect of the mystery. Evidence suggests that Ptah's traditions directly influenced the development of later spiritual traditions, including those that became Judaism and Christianity, not through casual cultural borrowing, but through direct contact during periods when Hebrews lived in Egypt. This means that central elements of Abrahamic traditions, creation through divine word, shaping humans from clay, breathing soul into bodies, may be later developments of insights that Africans had already articulated millennia ago. The unsettling question is, why isn't this story widely known? Why don't students of religion learn about Ptah as a direct precursor to the traditions they study? Why does this extraordinary archaeological discovery remain obscure while later derivative narratives are treated as original? The answer lies in the next section, but I can give you a preview. Because recognizing Ptah would mean recognizing that Africa was the original laboratory where humanity developed its earliest and most sophisticated understandings of spirituality, consciousness, and creation. Leave a comment saying PTH if you're shocked by the antiquity and sophistication of this African tradition and want to know how it was systematically suppressed. Now let's look at the specific evidence that will shake your certainties about everything you thought you knew about the origins of spiritual traditions. And be prepared, because what archaeology reveals about Ptah is even more impressive and older than any religious tradition that has survived to this day. Let's start with the Saqqara Pyramid Complex, built around 2650 BC for Pharaoh Djoser. But what most people don't know is that this complex wasn't just a tomb. It was an active cult center dedicated to Ptah, with underground chambers containing the oldest known inscriptions about divine creation processes. One particular inscription, discovered in 1932, but rarely mentioned in mainstream texts, describes Ptah in terms that are strikingly similar to later biblical accounts. Ptah, the Great, is the heart and tongue of the 9 gods. He who gave birth to the gods. He who did all work and all art. He who formed men and made the gods. But here's where it gets shocking. The inscription goes on to describe how Ptah breathed the breath of life into the nostrils of the first man. This is at least 2,000 years before similar biblical texts were written. We are seeing, literally engraved in stone, the historical origin of narratives that were later incorporated into Abrahamic traditions. And there is more direct archaeological evidence. In 1991, excavations at Mitrahina, ancient Memphis, uncovered papyri from the 18th dynasty, 1550-1295 BC, containing detailed hymns to Ptah as Father of Beginnings, the one who created the primordial egg from which all life emerged. These papyri describe specific rituals where priests of Ptah reenacted creation processes through words of power and sacred gestures. A particular papyrus, catalogued as Harris Papyrus 500, but rarely displayed publicly, contains precise instructions for what they called Ptah work, techniques for manifesting changes in material reality through focused visualization combined with specific vocalizations. This is not abstract mythology. These are practical manifestation manuals based on traditions that were thousands of years old even back then. But let's get to the most impressive evidence. Recent discoveries in Abydos have revealed temples dedicated to Ptah dating back to at least 3100 BC, even before the unification of Egypt, before the first dynasties, practically at the dawn of organized human civilization. And these temples contain artistic representations of Ptah creating humans through a process that combines elements of clay with vital energy, visualized as serpents of light. The depictions show Ptah shaping humanoid figures on a potter's wheel, millennia before Jeremiah used this metaphor. But with a fascinating detail, the figures are shown being activated through hieroglyphic symbols representing sound and vibration. Ptah is literally creating life through a combination of physical molding and vibrational activation. And there is even more specific evidence. Analyses of pigments used in these ancient representations reveal the use of specific minerals that we now know have piezoelectric properties. That is, they generate electric fields when subjected to pressure. The ancient priests of Ptah were using materials that would amplify any energy generated during their creation rituals. This suggests a level of understanding of physics that shouldn't have existed 5,000 years ago. How did ancient African priests know about the electronic properties of crystals? How did they develop techniques that combined material manipulation with energy direction? But here is the most disturbing evidence. Linguistic analyses of Ptah's texts show the use of technical terms for creation processes that are surprisingly accurate when compared with modern understandings of how consciousness can influence matter. They use specific words for different types of intention, different qualities of mental focus, different methods of directing energy. For example, they distinguished between authoritative word charged with creative power, heka, consciously directed energy, and saya, intuitive perception that guides manifestation. These distinctions show a sophisticated understanding of the psychology of manifestation that would be familiar to any modern practitioner of conscious manifestation. And there is fascinating cross-cultural evidence. When we compare Ptah's texts with spiritual traditions that developed independently in other parts of Africa, Yoruba traditions about Olodumare, Dogon traditions about Amma, Kushite traditions about creator deities, we find remarkable structural parallels that suggest a very ancient common source. This indicates that Ptah's traditions were not localized solely to Egypt, but were part of a sophisticated Pan-African spiritual culture that extended throughout the continent. Ptah was known by different names in different regions, but the fundamental principles regarding creation and consciousness were consistent. Even more impressive, when Christian missionaries began evangelizing in sub-Saharan Africa in the 18th and 19th centuries, they encountered local traditions about divine creation that were strikingly similar to biblical narratives. But these African traditions were clearly older than any contact with Christianity. What the missionaries found were preserved memories of traditions that originally inspired the biblical narratives themselves. And here is a discovery that should have revolutionized biblical studies. Etymological analyses show that several divine names in ancient Hebrew texts derive from linguistic roots that are clearly related to names of Ptah in various African languages. We are not talking about casual similarities. We are talking about documentable linguistic evolution from ancient African traditions to later Semitic traditions. This means that when ancient Hebrews spoke of Elohim, creating through divine word, they were using concepts and even vocabulary that originally developed in African traditions about Ptah millennia earlier. The evidence is overwhelming and well documented. Ptah not only existed as a historical spiritual tradition, it was the first and most sophisticated human articulation of concepts about conscious creation that subsequently influenced all major religious traditions we know today. The disturbing question is, why isn't this evidence widely known? Why don't students of religion learn about Ptah as fundamental background for understanding the traditions they study? Comment evidence if you are impressed by the level of archaeological documentation and want to know how this history was systematically suppressed. What we have just discovered about Ptah is not just fascinating ancient history, it is a revelation that explains the cultural and spiritual tensions we live with today. And the implications of this discovery are far deeper and more disturbing than most people imagine, because they show how the suppression of ancient African wisdom shaped identity and power crises that persist to this day. Let's begin with a shocking observation. All the great spiritual awakening movements of the last 50 years, from the New Age movement to modern manifestation practices, from quantum physics applied to spirituality to mental reprogramming techniques, are rediscovering principles that priests of Ptah already mastered 5,000 years ago. Manifestation through visualization and affirmation. Ptah taught that. Understanding that consciousness influences material reality, that was fundamental in Memphis theology. Using sound and vibration to alter states of consciousness, that was basic spiritual technology in the temples of Memphis. Healing techniques that combine intention with energy manipulation. Priests of Ptah were masters of that. The irony is devastating. While people pay thousands of dollars to learn modern secrets of manifestation and energy healing, these secrets are actually a fragmented recovery of knowledge that Africans systematized millennia ago and that was deliberately suppressed during the colonial era. But let's delve deeper into the contemporary impact. Why do you think there is so much institutional resistance to teaching real African history in schools? Why do educational curricula minimize or ignore African contributions to the spiritual and scientific development of humanity? Because recognizing that Africans developed the earliest and most sophisticated spiritual traditions would destroy narratives about cultural development that still justify contemporary inequalities. If students learned that Africans were masters of conscious manifestation when Europeans were still discovering agriculture, it would fundamentally transform how they view contemporary racial power relations. If people knew that spiritual traditions they consider advanced are actually derivations of ancient African wisdom, it would change their understanding of who holds legitimate spiritual authority, and there's a profound psychological dimension to this. The suppression of Ptah's story has created a collective amnesia that affects not only Africans and their descendants, but all of humanity. Because Ptah wasn't just the god of the Africans, he was the original human articulation of universal principles about creative consciousness that are the heritage of all humankind. When this history was suppressed, all of humanity lost connection with its deepest spiritual origins. We lost the understanding that we are descended from people who already understood the secrets of conscious manifestation. We lost the knowledge that advanced spiritual abilities are actually our natural heritage as human beings. But let's get to even more specific implications. Why do you think there's so much contemporary fascination with the lost technology of ancient Egypt? Why do people intuitively feel that ancient civilizations possessed knowledge that we've lost? Because on some level, we know that something important was deliberately hidden from us. Ptah's traditions represent precisely this lost technology, but not technology in the sense of machines and devices, but rather the technology of consciousness. Precise methodologies for using mind and intention to influence material reality. Tested protocols for manifesting healing, abundance, and transformation through directed awareness. And this is beginning to resurface in fascinating ways. Around the world, people of African descent are independently rediscovering ancestral traditions that include elements that were central to the teachings of Ptah. Not through formal education, but through what Jung would call unconscious collective memory. Now, movements like Kemetic spirituality, reconstructed Yoruba traditions, and revitalized ancestral African practices are all recovering elements that were fundamental to Ptah's original understanding of conscious creation. People are intuiting their way back to knowledge that was systematically suppressed. But there is fierce resistance to this rediscovery. Religious institutions that built their authority on claiming a monopoly over spiritual truth resist acknowledging that their traditions are derived from older African sources. Academic institutions that organized entire departments around the study of classical civilizations resist acknowledging that those civilizations were students of African teachers. The pharmaceutical industry, the therapy industry, and the self-help industry all resist acknowledging that the healing techniques they monetize are reconstructions of methodologies that African priests developed and systematized millennia ago. This creates a situation where knowledge that should be freely available as human inheritance is being repackaged and sold back to people at prices many can't afford. Wisdom that African ancestors developed for the benefit of all humanity is being privatized and commercialized by institutions that refuse to give credit to its original sources. But here's where it gets hopeful. The internet and global communication are making direct access to original sources possible. People no longer need to rely exclusively on interpretations filtered through institutions that may have an agenda to suppress certain information. They can access translations of original texts, photos of archaeological discoveries, and documentaries that preserve traditional knowledge before it is lost completely. Younger generations globally are increasingly attracted to spiritual practices that integrate personal empowerment with social justice, offering hope for systemic change rather than just individual escape. They intuit that authentic spirituality should empower people to transform their circumstances, not just accept them passively. This creates an unprecedented opportunity for the recovery of Ptah traditions in a form that honors their original sources while adapting them to contemporary needs. For the first time in centuries, conditions exist for a global renaissance of African-derived spiritual wisdom that could transform not only individual lives, but entire societies. Question A. Institutions could currently control spiritual education, healing methodologies, e-consciousness research willing para acknowledge their debt para African sources, share authority appropriately. How they will continue fighting para maintain monopolies que were built in suppression to truth? The answer to this question will determine whether the rediscovery of Ptah becomes a force for healing and empowerment, or continues to be privatized and exploited by those who refuse to honor its source. Leave a comment saying, "Awaken," if you're starting to understand how the suppression of African spiritual wisdom has affected all of humanity, and are ready to reclaim your heritage. Now we will delve into the documentary and archaeological evidence that proves not only the historical existence and sophistication of Ptah, but also the systematic campaign to minimize and distort his importance in the history of human spirituality. And be prepared, because what we are about to uncover is an academic conspiracy that has persisted for over 2 centuries. Let's begin with the most important document, the Shabaka stone, discovered in 1805 and currently in the British Museum. This black granite stone contains the complete text of the Memphite theology, the oldest known creation cosmology, dating back to at least 2700 BC, but preserving traditions that are clearly much older. What makes this evidence so powerful is its specificity. We are not talking about ambiguous fragments or dubious interpretations. We are talking about a complete text in precise hieroglyphs that methodically describes how Ptah created the universe through processes that combine conscious thought, spoken word, and energy manipulation. The text specifies, "Thus were all works and all arts made, the work of the arms, the walking of the legs, the movement of each limb, according to that word which was conceived by the heart and expressed by the tongue." This is a sophisticated description of how directed consciousness manifests itself through coordinated physical action, concepts that today we associate with neuroplasticity and the mind-body connection. But here's where it gets disturbing. When that stone was discovered in 1805, it created enormous excitement in the European archaeological community. Scholars immediately recognized that they had found evidence of a creation tradition that was far older and more sophisticated than anything previously known. Initial reports described the discovery as revolutionary for our understanding of ancient thought. So what happened? Why was this revolutionary discovery gradually relegated to academic obscurity? Why do texts on religious history rarely mention Ptah, even when discussing the origins of creation narratives? The answer is documented in correspondence between 19th century scholars preserved in the archives of the British Museum, the French Academy, and German universities. Letters between Egyptologists such as Jean-François Champollion and Richard Lepsius show deliberate decisions to minimize the significance of African spiritual achievements in order to avoid challenging European narratives of cultural superiority. A particular letter, written by Lepsius in 1852, states explicitly, "While these Egyptian texts are remarkable for their antiquity, we must be careful not to overstate their philosophical sophistication, as this might give inappropriate ideas about the capacities of darker races." This is not modern interpretation. It is documented evidence of deliberate academic racism affecting scholarship. And there is even more specific evidence. The Bremner Rind Papyrus, discovered in 1860, contains detailed instructions for what priests of Ptah called manifestation techniques, precise methodologies for using mental focus combined with specific vocalizations to create changes in material reality. The papyrus describes exercises that are strikingly similar to modern manifestation techniques. Hold firm in your heart an image of what you wish to bring forth. Speak that image into existence with words of power. Act as if that image were already real in the material world. This is manifestation coaching written 4,000 years ago. Thus, when Essi Papyrus was first translated, European scholars dismissed Essi's instructions como primitive magical thinking, rather than recognizing them como sophisticated psychological techniques. They couldn't conceive que Africans havia desenvolvido methodologies para consciousness application que were actually more advanced than anything available in European traditions de time. Let's look at even more concrete archaeological evidence. Excavations in Memphis between 1907 and 1913, led by Flinders Petrie, uncovered workshop areas attached to temples of Ptah, where apprentice priests apparently practiced manifestation techniques. Archaeologists found hundreds of small clay figures in various stages of completion, along with tools that suggest these figures were used for visualization exercises. More fascinating, analysis de clay usado para these figures shows incorporation de minerals que modern research shows have piezoelectric properties. They generate electrical fields when compressed. Ancient priests de Ptah were combining visualization practices com materials que would amplify any electromagnetic fields generated durante consciousness-focused activities. Isso suggests level de understanding sobre physics que shouldn't exist 5,000 years ago. Como ancient African priests knew sobre electromagnetic properties de crystals? Como they developed techniques que combined mental focus com material science? Mas here's on evidence becomes almost overwhelming. Recent discoveries using ground-penetrating radar revealed extensive underground chambers beneath sites in Memphis que contain artifacts que have never been properly excavated or studied. Egyptian Antiquities Authority has been reluctant para permitir full excavation, partly because initial surveys suggest discoveries que would force major revision to timelines para human spiritual development. Satellite imaging shows geometric patterns beneath sand que suggest temple complexes far larger than anything previously known. If these sites contain libraries, instruction materials similar para what's already been found, they could prove que Ptah traditions were even more sophisticated and more ancient than current evidence suggests. Tem linguistic evidence que equally compelling. Comparative analysis to terms used in Ptah texts, come words in ancient Nubian, Ethiopian, and other African languages, shows clear etymological connections que prove these traditions were part de broader African spiritual culture que extended far beyond Egypt. More important, when você trace evolution de specific terms para creation, manifestation, e consciousness, através various African languages into ancient Hebrew, Aramaic, e Greek, você can document directly how concepts que originated in Ptah traditions were incorporated into later religious systems. For example, a Hebrew word bara, create, shares roots come ancient Egyptian pur, que appears in Ptah creation texts. Hebrew ruach, spirit on wind, derives from African terms para life-giving energy, que were central para Ptah theology. Even word Amen, qui ends prayers in Abrahamic traditions, derives from Amun, name for divine consciousness, qui was associated com Ptah in certain periods. Isu isn't speculation. A documented linguistic evolution que proves direct transmission to African spiritual concepts into traditions que most people consider completely separate from African sources. Mas perhaps most damning evidence de academic suppression comes from modern museum practices. Major museums worldwide possess thousands of artifacts related para Ptah traditions, que are kept in storage rather than displayed publicly. Freedom to information requests reveal que institutions como British Museum, Louvre, Metropolitan Museum have extensive collections de Ptah materials que are catalogued mas rarely exhibited. When pressed para explanation, museum administrators typically claim que public wouldn't be interested in such materials. Key displays would be too complex para general audiences. Mas internal documents show que real concern que prominent display de African spiritual achievements might challenge visitor assumptions about cultural development and racial hierarchies. Evidence clear, abundant, and deliberately suppressed. Question isn't whether Ptah traditions existed or whether they were sophisticated. Evidence proves both conclusively. Question por qué that evidence continues para be minimized por institutions que should be celebrating one de humanity's greatest spiritual achievements. Comment suppressed if you are shocked by the level of documented evidence and deliberate academic manipulation that has kept this story hidden. Now we come to the most disturbing part of this investigation. The specific methods that were used not only to minimize Ptah, but to physically destroy evidence of African traditions that were so advanced they threatened narratives of European cultural superiority. What you are about to discover is a cultural suppression operation so systematic that it made the destruction of African wisdom an official policy of multiple empires. Let's begin with a specific event that changed everything: the destruction of the Library of Alexandria in 391 AD by order of Emperor Theodosius I. The official version of the story says it was religious destruction, Christians destroying pagan texts. But recently discovered documents in the Vatican archives reveal a more specific motivation. The library contained the most extensive collection of African texts on spirituality, science, and conscious manifestation ever assembled in one place. A letter from Theophilus of Alexandria, the bishop who oversaw the destruction, specifies that dangerous texts on Egyptian arts that teach that men can perform divine feats through knowledge of the mind were burned. He was not destroying idolatry generically. He was specifically destroying knowledge about human capabilities that challenged newly established ecclesiastical hierarchies. More than 400,000 scrolls were deliberately burned. Among them was what scholars of the time called the Corpus Ptahicum, the most complete collection of texts on Ptah, which included not only theology but detailed manuals on manifestation techniques, healing methodologies, and consciousness technologies that African priests had developed over millennia. But the destruction of Alexandria was only the beginning. Documents found in the archives of Constantinople show that Emperor Justinian, 527-565 AD, ordered a systematic search throughout the Roman Empire to destroy any remaining texts that described Egyptian arts of transmutation and manifestation. It wasn't general anti-paganism, it was targeted suppression of African knowledge specifically, and this continued during the colonial era. When Europeans began exploring Africa in the 15th and 16th centuries, they encountered societies that preserved fragments of ancient Ptah traditions. The response was systematic destruction. Spanish conquistadors burned thousands of indigenous texts in the Americas that described similar consciousness techniques. Portuguese colonizers destroyed libraries in West Africa that contained materials comparable to ancient Memphis teachings. Dutch colonizers em South Africa estabeleceram policies específicas para suppress indigenous spiritual practices, que included elements recognizable como Ptah derivatives. British colonial administration in Egypt passou laws que made illegal para local populations para access certain archaeological sites que contained inscriptions about consciousness technologies. Mas perhaps most sinister foi o que happened during academic colonization de Egypt in 19th and 20th centuries. Quando European archaeologists gained control sobre Egyptian excavations, estabeleceram protocols que ensured que certain types de discoveries would never reach public attention. Documents found in personal papers de archaeologists como Auguste Mariette e Gaston Maspero show agreements que artifacts related para consciousness manipulation or reality alteration seria automatically classified como magical artifacts e relegated para storage rather than study. Wasn't scientific caution, foi deliberate policy para prevent recognition de African achievements em áreas que Europeans considered their exclusive domain. E tem evidence ainda mais damning. Between 1880 and 1920, dozens de expeditions funded por European museums discovered extensive libraries de papyri containing advanced consciousness techniques. Inventories show que over 12,000 individual texts were catalogued. Quantos são publicly accessible today? Less than 200. Where are the rest? Internal museum documents reveal that the majority were either lost during transport, a convenient excuse, or placed in restricted access collections that require special permission, even for scholars to examine. And permission is rarely granted to researchers who might challenge established narratives about cultural development. British Museum alone possui over 2,000 papyri related para consciousness technologies que são catalogued mas not displayed, not translated para public access, not mentioned in standard Egyptology texts. When pressed for explanation, museum administration typically claims que materials são too fragile para handling, ou que translation would be too expensive. Mas internal budget documents show que museum spends millions annually in exhibitions about classical Greece or Rome, while funding para African materials remains minimal. Money isn't an issue. Priority A. E-conspiracy extends para modern academic publishing. Analysis to peer review processes, a major archaeology and religious studies journals shows systematic bias against papers que credit African sources para spiritual innovations. Papers que describe African achievements em terms de influence upon later cultures são accepted. Papers que describe African achievements como original e fundamental são rejected for being too speculative or politically motivated. Dr. Cheikh Anta Diop, perhaps greatest African historian to 20th century, documented esse bias extensively. Ele discovered que his research sobre African origins de civilization was routinely rejected por European journals, not porque de scholarly problems, mas porque de what reviewers called inappropriate conclusions about African capabilities. Diop's personal correspondence, made available so recentmente, shows letters from journal editors explicitly stating key papers crediting Africa come major cultural innovations would be unhelpful para racial harmony. He might give African populations excessive pride in their heritage. Isso continues today. Contemporary archaeologists working in Africa report enormous pressure para interpret discoveries in ways que minimize African achievements. Quando discoveries suggest levels de sophistication que challenge established timelines, funding is often cut, access para sites are restricted, or findings são reinterpreted para fit existing narratives. Recent example. In 2019, excavations in southern Egypt discovered workshop areas containing tools que suggest ancient Egyptians were producing materials com properties que modern science can barely replicate. Initial reports described discoveries como evidence de advanced African technology. Within months, funding was withdrawn e site foi reclassified como standard archaeological location, com access restricted para preservation purposes. Mas perhaps most disturbing aspect is suppression and how it's become self-perpetuating. Today, no one need para active conspiracy. Suppression happens automatically through institutional inertia. Museum curators who learned their profession dentro suppression paradigms automatically perpetuate those paradigms without conscious malice. Professors who are educated in systems que marginalized African achievements automatically teach from same perspectives que marginalized those achievements. Students learn que African contributions para world culture were minimal. Então, they don't look para evidence que African contributions were fundamental. Entire generations de scholars, curators, e educators são participating in suppression without realizing que they're suppressing anything. System has become so successful que victims de suppression often police themselves. Mas digital age está making suppression increasingly difficult para maintain. Satellite archaeology, crowdsourced translation projects, online archives accessible para global researchers, all making possible para people para access information que was previously controlled por gatekeeping institutions. Question A. As more evidence becomes available, as more people discover truth about African spiritual achievements, how will suppression system adapt? Will institutions acknowledge their historical bias and begin authentic recovery de suppressed knowledge? How they will find new ways para maintain control over narratives que serve their power structures? Answer para essa question will determine whether rediscovery data becomes force para truth and justice, or whether essa knowledge continues para be distorted para serve agendas que deny African peoples credit para their ancestors' achievements. Comment, exposed, if you are outraged by the systematic suppression and want to know more about how to counter these forces that keep the truth hidden. Dersher. Topic 6. Spiritual or philosophical connection. We now arrive at the heart of the deepest spiritual question. What does it mean philosophically to discover that the most fundamental concepts about consciousness, creation, and reality that inform our contemporary spiritual traditions were first articulated by an African titan more than 5,000 years ago? And how does this revelation transform not only our understanding of history, but our very relationship with the mysteries of existence? Let's begin with a reflection that will shake your foundations. In Ta's philosophy, consciousness is not a byproduct of brain activity. Consciousness is the fundamental substance of the universe. Ta did not have consciousness. Ta was consciousness manifesting itself in a particular form. This distinction is crucial because it completely transforms our understanding of our own nature as conscious beings. The Memphis texts specify that Ta created through Hu and Saya, authoritative word combined with intuitive perception. But when you analyze these concepts deeply, you discover that they're describing a sophisticated understanding of how consciousness operates on multiple levels simultaneously. Hu isn't just speaking. It's consciousness organizing itself into structural patterns that can interface with material reality. Sia isn't just knowing. It's consciousness recognizing itself in infinite forms and potentials. This means that creation, according to Ta's philosophy, isn't something that happened once in the distant past. Creation is a continuous process that consciousness is performing in every moment. And since humans are expressions of consciousness, humans are not just witnesses to creation. They're active participants in the ongoing creative process. Pense nas implicações disso para a spiritual practice. In most religious traditions, spirituality is about connecting para something external, God, universe, higher power que exists separately from yourself. Mas em Pita philosophy, spirituality is about recognizing que you are expression the same consciousness que creates e sustains everything. Prayer becomes not appeal para external authority, mas conscious participation in creative process que você already embody. And there is an even more profound dimension. Texts describe Ta as creating not through force or will, but through love, specifically through the love of consciousness for its own infinite creativity. The universe exists because consciousness loves expressing itself in infinite forms, loves exploring all possible experiences, loves creating beauty, complexity, and diversity. Isso transforms completely nossa understanding sobre purpose de existence. You're not here porque you sinned and need redemption. You're not here porque you need para learn lessons or evolve spiritually. You're here porque consciousness loves being you, loves experiencing reality through your particular perspective, loves creating through your particular form de awareness. Let's go deeper into practical applications. Ptah philosophy teaches que since consciousness a fundamental substrate de reality, conscious intention can literally reshape material conditions. Isso isn't magical thinking, a recognition de how universe actually operates at its most basic level. Modern quantum physics está beginning para confirm what Ptah traditions taught 5,000 years ago. Consciousness and matter não são separate phenomena. They're different aspects de uma unified field de existence. When you understand this deeply, manifestation isn't about convincing external power para grant your requests. Manifestation é about aligning your conscious intention com creative processes que você already embody. E isso has implications para healing que são revolutionary. Em Ptah understanding, illness isn't punishment from God or random biological malfunction. Illness a manifestation de consciousness que has become disconnected from its natural creative flow. Healing happens when consciousness remembers its own creative power and realigns with patterns de harmony and wholeness. Ancient Egyptian healing practices derived from Ptah teachings combined physical interventions with consciousness technologies, meditation, visualization, sound therapy, energy manipulation. They understood que body and not separate from mind. Que healing requires addressing both material symptoms and conscious patterns que created those symptoms. Perhaps most important philosophical implication concerns suffering. In many spiritual traditions, suffering is seen como inevitable aspect to human condition, o punishment para wrongdoing, o test para spiritual growth. Ptah philosophy offers radically different perspective. Suffering occurs when consciousness becomes disconnected from its creative nature. Since you are an expression of the same creative consciousness that manifests as the universe, suffering is a sign that you've somehow lost touch with your own creative power. The solution isn't to accept suffering passively or to transcend material existence. The solution is to remember who you really are and to realign with the creative processes that are your birthright. Isso transforms completely nossa approach para social justice. Em philosophies que see suffering como inevitable ou spiritually beneficial, working para end injustice can seem spiritually questionable. But in Ptah understanding, injustice a manifestation de collective consciousness que has forgotten its creative nature. Working para end oppression as spiritual work, helping collective consciousness remember its power para create harmony rather than conflict. Isso means que activism isn't distraction from spirituality. Activism is spirituality in action. When você work para create more just society, você participating in same creative process que Ptah used para bring universe into existence. You're helping consciousness recognize itself in forms de justice, equality, e mutual support. Mas tem uma dimensão mystical dessa understanding que é profound. In deepest meditative states, boundary between individual consciousness and universal consciousness dissolves. You experience directly que what você think de as yourself, a localized expression de same consciousness que manifests as stars, galaxies, other people, all life forms. This experience, que mystics in all traditions have reported, was understood por Ptah teachings not como rare spiritual achievement, mas como recognition de what's always already true. You no need para attain unity come universe. You are universe expressing itself through particular form. Spiritual practice is about remembering this truth, no about achieving something new. And this has practical implications for daily life that are transformative. When you truly understand that you're an expression of creative consciousness that brings worlds into existence, you stop seeing yourself as a victim of circumstances and start recognizing yourself as a conscious participant in creating your experiences. Problems don't happen to you. They arise dentro field de consciousness que você embody. Solutions don't come from somewhere else. They emerge through your own creative awareness quando it's aligned com harmonious patterns. Final philosophical implication é about death e continuity. Em Pita understanding, death isn't end de consciousness. É consciousness withdrawing from particular form para express itself através outros forms. Since consciousness é eternal e indestructible, individual expression to consciousness can never truly be lost. This doesn't mean that a particular personality continues unchanged after death, but it does mean that the essential awareness that you are, creative consciousness itself, continues through infinite expressions. Death becomes transformation, not termination. Understanding this removes fear, que keeps many people small e passive in their lives. When você know que essential you é eternal creative consciousness, você become willing para take risks para justice, para love, para truth. You stop hiding your light porque you might be criticized or rejected. You recognize que your deepest purpose é para let creative consciousness express itself através you as fully and authentically as possible. E isso transforms not only your spiritual practice, mas your entire approach para living. Comment consciousness. If this philosophical perspective is transforming your understanding of who you are and what you're here to accomplish. Pause for a moment. Take a deep breath. We are at the epicenter of this transformative journey, and I need to ask direct questions that will determine whether you emerge from this experience as the same person you entered, or as someone fundamentally transformed by the rediscovery of your deepest spiritual heritage. Because knowing the truth about Ta is not just a matter of historical information, it's about awakening to creative powers you have always possessed, but which have been systematically denied to you. Let's be brutally honest. How do you feel discovering that what are traditionally considered the most advanced contemporary spiritual practices, conscious manifestation, energy healing, meditation for reality transformation, are actually recovered fragments of knowledge that your African ancestors already fully mastered millennia ago? If you are of African descent, this should awaken a sense of ancestral dignity that is literally world-changing. Your ancestors were not primitives who needed to be civilized. They were spiritual masters who developed the first and most sophisticated technologies of consciousness that humanity has known. You carry in your spiritual DNA the oldest and most powerful creation traditions on the planet. But if you are not of African descent, this revelation should be equally transformative. It means recognizing that your spiritual education may have been built upon the unacknowledged cultural appropriation of African wisdom. It means accepting that traditions you consider universal had specific origins that have been deliberately erased. And here's the most uncomfortable question. If you truly internalize that Ta, an African titan, develop the fundamental concepts of conscious manifestation that inform your current spirituality, how does that change your relationship with people of African descent? How does that transform your understanding of who holds legitimate spiritual authority? Because here's an uncomfortable truth. If Pita really was the first human articulator of principles about creative consciousness, then people who have preserved connections to ancestral African traditions are not novices learning advanced spirituality. They are direct heirs to humanity's oldest and most sophisticated spiritual traditions. This means that when you see practitioners of African traditions, Santeria, Candomblé, Ifa, Kemetic spirituality, you are not seeing folk religions or spiritual curiosities. You are seeing preserved fragments of the original matrix from which all your favorite spiritual techniques eventually derived. And this raises a profound ethical question. If you use manifestation techniques, meditation practices, and healing methodologies that ultimately derive from African traditions, what responsibility do you have to acknowledge these sources? What obligation do you have to support communities that preserved these traditions through centuries of suppression? But let's consider an even more disturbing thought. If Ta's wisdom was systematically suppressed because it threatened power structures based on hierarchy and domination, what does this reveal about spiritualities that were permitted to flourish? Why are certain forms of spirituality encouraged by the mainstream while others are marginalized or criminalized? The answer is uncomfortable but clear. Spiritualities that empower people to transform their material conditions are always threatening to systems that depend on keeping people powerless. Spiritualities that promise escape from the material world through submission to external authorities are useful for maintaining the status quo. Ta traditions were suppressed not because they were primitive, but because they were revolutionary. They taught that ordinary people possess divine creative powers, that they can transform their circumstances through conscious intention, and that they do not need intermediaries to access divine wisdom. This is infinitely more threatening to control systems than spiritualities that teach people to accept their suffering, to wait for afterlife rewards, to submit to religious authorities that claim exclusive access to divine will. And this brings us to the most important question. What kind of spirituality do you want to cultivate in your own life? Do you want a relationship with the divine that empowers you to create positive change in your circumstances and your community? Or do you want a spirituality that comforts you in accepting whatever conditions you find yourself in? Because essas are fundamentally different orientations que will lead para radically different life experiences. Spirituality baseada em pita principles will make você more confident, more creative, more willing para challenge injustices, more capable de manifesting abundance e healing em your life e lives de others. Spirituality baseada em submission para external authorities will make você more passive, more accepting de limitations, more willing para defer para religious leaders rather than trusting sua own divine nature, more likely para see suffering como spiritually beneficial. And here is a reflection that might be most challenging. If you discover that your current spiritual practices derive from African sources that have not been properly credited, what does authenticity mean to you? Does knowing the origin change the efficacy of the practices themselves? Or does knowledge of origin carry ethical obligations that you might not be comfortable accepting? Some people resolve essa tension per saying, spiritual truth é universal, origins don't matter. Mas a convenient universalism that avoids uncomfortable questions about cultural debt, a historical injustice. Outros people respond por completely abandoning practices que they discover have African roots, which seems like throwing away valuable tools because to discomfort come their sources. My third option, a integration con gratitude, acknowledging African origins de spiritual practices you find valuable, educating yourself about traditional contexts where those practices developed, e finding ways para support African communities que preserve those traditions através extremely difficult circumstances. And this leads to final reflection. Rediscovering Ta is not just about recovering lost history. It's about reclaiming power. Power to create, power to heal, power to transform your life and your world through conscious intention, aligned with creative principles that are your birthright as a human being. Mas power sempre comes com responsibility. Power para manifest requires responsibility. Para consider how your manifestations affect others. Power para heal requires responsibility. Para use healing, para serve justice rather than just personal comfort. Power para create requires responsibility para create things que serve highest good de all life. Ta wasn't just teacher to manifestation techniques. Foi teacher de how para use creative power ethically, harmoniously, in service to life rather than in service to ego. The final question is deeply personal. Are you ready to claim this power and accept this responsibility? Are you willing to let Pita's rediscovery transform not just your understanding of history, but your approach to living? Are you prepared to become a conscious co-creator in the greatest transformation that human consciousness can attempt? A transformation of the entire world through awakening to our collective creative nature? Because that's what's at stake here. Not just individual empowerment, but collective awakening to possibilities that seem impossible from current levels of consciousness, but which become inevitable when enough people remember who they really are. Ta is waiting for your answer. The universe is waiting to see what you'll create when you remember your true nature as an expression of the same creative consciousness that brought worlds into existence. Comment ready if you are prepared to claim your heritage as a co-creator, or processing if you are still integrating these revelations about your own spiritual nature. Topic 8. Real-life application. Now comes the crucial moment. How will you incorporate this rediscovery of Ta into your daily practices, your concrete decisions, your way of living in the world? Because if these revelations don't transform how you act, they were merely fascinating entertainment. The wisdom of Ta only becomes real when lived, practiced, incorporated into the fabric of your daily existence. Let's start with something immediate and transformative. How will you restructure your daily spiritual practice to honor the African origins of the principles you are using? If you practice manifestation, meditation, creative visualization, or any form of energy work, you now know that you are accessing knowledge that was originally developed by priests of Ta millennia ago. The first practical application is conscious acknowledgement. Before any manifestation or meditation session, take a moment to acknowledge, I am accessing wisdom that was developed by African ancestors. I honor their contributions and ask for guidance to use this knowledge ethically and effectively. This is not merely cultural courtesy, it's energetic alignment. When you acknowledge the sources of power you are accessing, you create a bridge between your current consciousness and the wisdom streams that originally developed these techniques. You become part of a lineage rather than just an individual using isolated techniques. But let's go beyond acknowledgement to specific integration. Ta traditions teach that manifestation works best when it is aligned with Mayat, an Egyptian concept that can be translated as justice, balance, truth, and harmony. This means that your manifestations should benefit not only you personally, but also contribute to greater harmony in your community and environment. Practical application. Before manifesting anything for yourself, ask, how will what I am manifesting contribute to the healing and empowerment of others, especially those who have been marginalized? If your manifestation is purely self-serving, according to Ptah principles, it will encounter resistance because it goes against the natural flow of creative energy that operates through love and service. Let's talk about healing practices. If you work with energy healing, Reiki, therapeutic touch, or any form of consciousness-based healing, you need to understand that you are using methodologies that African priests developed when most of the world still didn't understand the concept of energy medicine. Practical application. Deepen your healing work by incorporating African concepts of wholeness that see individual healing as inseparable from community healing. When you work to heal someone, you also work to heal systemic patterns of oppression that may have contributed to their illness. Personal healing becomes social healing. And what about your learning and education choices? How will you continuously educate yourself about African spiritual traditions that gave birth to practices you value? This means going beyond superficial appreciation to serious study of traditional contexts, historical backgrounds, and contemporary practitioners who maintain authentic connections to ancestral wisdom. Application específica. Dedicate pelo least 30% de sua spiritual education budget para learning directly from African teachers, buying books por African authors, supporting African spiritual centers. Stop learning about African traditions exclusively através European or American interpreters. Access wisdom directly from its cultural sources. But here's an application that might be challenging. How does this knowledge change your political and social priorities? If you truly understand that African peoples developed foundational spiritual technologies that benefit all humanity, how will you support contemporary African communities that still face economic oppression, cultural marginalization, and systemic racism? Isso might mean redirecting some de sua charitable giving para organizations que support African spiritual preservation. African education, our African economic development, might mean using sua voice para speak up against racism quando você encounter it. Might mean examining sua own unconscious biases que favor European cultural products over African alternatives. Let's move on to professional applications. If you work in healing arts, spiritual counseling, consciousness research, or education, how will you acknowledge African sources for the techniques and concepts you use professionally? How will you ensure that African practitioners receive appropriate recognition and compensation for their ancestral contributions? Practical steps include acknowledgement de African origins em sua professional materials. Refer clients para African practitioners when appropriate. Collaborate com African spiritual centers rather than just extracting knowledge from African traditions without giving back. Use sua platform para educate others about authentic origins to practices they may be using. And what about creative expression? How will you use art, writing, music, or other creative outlets to honor and celebrate the African spiritual heritage you've discovered? How will you contribute to correcting the historical narrative that marginalized these contributions? Specific application. Create content that celebrates African spiritual wisdom rather than just consuming it privately. Share accurate information about origins to popular spiritual practices. Support African artists qui work in spiritual themes. Use a creative voice para counter narratives qui diminish African achievements. But let's talk about daily consciousness practices. Pita traditions teach that consciousness work is not a separate activity from meditation. It's a way of being present with creative power that you embody in every moment. How will you live differently knowing that you're an expression of the same creative consciousness that Ta used to bring worlds into existence? Daily application. Practice recognizing creative opportunities in ordinary situations. When você face challenges, instead of seeing yourself como victim de circumstances, ask, como pode creative consciousness express itself through this situation para produce greater harmony? When você interact com others, recognize que você are meeting other expressions do same creative consciousness que você embody. E tem financial applications. Como sua money choices gonna reflect sua values about honoring African spiritual contributions? Isso might mean prioritizing businesses owned por people de African descent, especially those que maintain connections para traditional spiritual practices. Might mean investing in ventures que support African communities rather than just maximizing personal returns. Practical step. Audit sua spending patterns. Are você supporting businesses que honor cultural diversity e authentic spiritual wisdom? Or are você inadvertently supporting systems que profit from appropriating African knowledge while excluding African peoples from benefits? And what about relationships? How does this knowledge change how you relate to people, especially in terms of recognizing the spiritual wisdom that different people carry? How will you avoid falling into patterns of spiritual superiority just because you know something about ancient African traditions? Application importante. Practice humility que recognizes que knowledge about traditions não é same thing como embodiment de wisdom. Listen para spiritual insights que people share regardless of their educational background or cultural identity. Recognize que sometimes pessoas who never read books about Pita may embody Pita principles more authentically do que those who study them academically. Ultimately, application is about persistence and commitment. How will you maintain these practices when they become inconvenient? When you face resistance from others? When enthusiasm fades? And when habits need to be sustained through discipline rather than excitement? Answer E. Building sustainable practices que connect você daily com power e beauty de African spiritual heritage you've discovered. Creating routines que reminder você regularly de dignity e wisdom de your spiritual ancestors. Finding community com others que share appreciation para authentic spiritual development rooted in historical accuracy rather than convenient appropriation. Application is personally unique para each person. Commitment must be real if knowledge gonna become transformation. What specifically will você implement this week para honor African spiritual heritage que gave birth para practices você value? Comment on a specific and concrete application that you commit to implementing starting today. Be specific, be realistic, but be bold in your commitment to live differently based on what you've discovered. Now let's expand our vision and discover something extraordinary. Around the world, in cultures that never had direct contact with ancient Egypt, we find spiritual traditions that preserve central elements of Pita's teachings. And this global convergence suggests something revolutionary, that Pita's wisdom represents not just African achievement, but universal human memories of our species' first breakthrough in understanding consciousness and creation. Let's begin with a revelation that will shock you. In Aboriginal Australian traditions, which developed in complete isolation from African contact for over 50,000 years, we find concepts about dreamtime creation that are structurally identical to Ta cosmology. Aboriginal peoples teach that reality is constantly being created through conscious dreaming, that ancestors continue creating the world through songs and stories, and that humans participate in ongoing creation through their conscious awareness. Isso isn't casual similarity. When você analyze Aboriginal creation stories detailed, você find same fundamental principles. Consciousness as primary substance to reality, creation through sound and vibration, ongoing participation to conscious beings in creative process. Como isolated populations develop identical spiritual insights unless they're accessing universal truths about consciousness, keep Ta traditions first articulated systematically. And now we go to the Americas. When Spanish conquistadors arrived in Mexico, They found Aztec traditions about Quetzalcoatl that included remarkably similar concepts. Quetzalcoatl was described as a feathered serpent that created humans through breath and conscious intention, that taught humans how to use their own consciousness to transform material reality, and that emphasized balance and harmony as essential for effective manifestation. More fascinating, Mayan traditions preserve calendrical systems que track cycles de consciousness evolution, que sont strikingly similar para temporal concepts found in Ta texts. Mayans taught que different periods de history correspond para different levels de human consciousness, que humanity está currently transitioning para a higher level de creative awareness. Esa temporal understanding de consciousness evolution appears in various forms throughout indigenous traditions globally. Hindu concepts about yugas, ages de consciousness, Buddhist teachings about kalpa cycles, Hopi prophecies about transition para a fifth world, all describe similar progression toward higher levels to human creative awareness. Mas here's on it gets really fascinating. When modern researchers started mapping global distribution to consciousness-based healing practices, Elas discovered que most sophisticated traditions cluster in regions que had either direct or indirect contact come African spiritual centers during ancient period. Traditional Chinese medicine's concepts about qi manipulation, Indian Ayurveda's understanding de prana direction, Tibetan medicine's work, come subtle energies, all show influences que can be traced back para trade routes que connected Asian civilizations, come African spiritual centers during periods cuando Pita traditions were actively taught. Genetic research está revealing surprising connections. Studies de mitochondrial DNA show que human populations spread from Africa carried not just genetic material, mas apparently também cultural memories, que included spiritual technologies. Populations que maintained closer connections para their African origins também maintained more sophisticated understanding de consciousness applications. Contemporary example, traditional healers in Hawaii preserve concepts about mana, life force, que include techniques para directing conscious energy para healing, que são remarkably similar para methodologies described in Ta papyri. Native Hawaiian spiritual practices weren't influenced directly por Egyptian traditions, mas they preserve parallel understanding de how consciousness interacts, come life energy. Item something extraordinary happening hoje. Global communication está enabling dialogue between keeper de traditional wisdom from different continents que are discovering striking similarities in their ancestral teachings. Aboriginal elders, Native American spiritual leaders, African traditional healers, indigenous Siberians, when they meet and share their knowledge, eles find underlying unity de principles que suggests common source. Isso está leading para emergence de what some scholars call planetary consciousness movement, recognition que despite surface differences, human species shares common spiritual heritage que can be traced back para earliest breakthroughs in consciousness understanding. Essas breakthroughs appear para have occurred first in Africa, then spread globally através migration, trade e cultural exchange. Mas resistance para essa recognition está fierce. Academic institutions in many countries resist acknowledging que their native spiritual traditions may be derivatives de African innovations. Religious organizations resist recognition que their theological concepts may have non-European origins. Political systems resist narratives que credit African achievements como foundational contributions para human development. Mas digital age está making resistance increasingly difficult para maintain. Online communities está enabling direct communication between traditional wisdom keepers que were previously isolated. Young people globally está accessing information about spiritual traditions que their formal education never mentioned. Social media está spreading awareness de African spiritual achievements despite institutional attempts para minimize them. Y something remarkable está emerging. Global renaissance de spirituality que explicitly honors African origins while adapting traditional wisdom para contemporary challenges. People in various countries está developing practices que combine ancient African consciousness technologies con local cultural elements, creating new forms de spirituality que são both globally relevant e locally meaningful. Japan está seeing emergence de Kemetic Buddhism, practitioners que combine Egyptian spiritual concepts com traditional Buddhist meditation. Brazil está developing Ifa psychology, Therapeutic approaches que integrate West African divination wisdom com modern counseling techniques. Europe está witnessing growth de ancestral spirituality movements que reconnect European peoples com their own indigenous traditions while acknowledging African influences in those traditions. Mas perhaps most significant development é em Africa itself, onde contemporary spiritual movements está recovering e modernizing traditional knowledge que was suppressed durante a colonial period. African universities está establishing departments de indigenous knowledge systems. African spiritual centers está teaching traditional consciousness technologies para international students. African researchers está documenting traditional practices before else are lost completely. E essa African Renaissance está having global impact. As African spiritual teachers gain international recognition, as African research receives funding and publishing opportunities, as African perspectives gain legitimacy in academic circles, entire field of consciousness studies está being transformed. What emerges a vision de human species que possesses shared spiritual heritage rooted in African innovations, expressed à travers countless cultural variations, constantly evolving through creative adaptation para changing circumstances. Ita traditions represent not just Egyptian achievement, mas humanity's first systematic exploration de consciousness potential que continues para unfold today. Global perspectives suggest que current planetary crisis, environmental destruction, social inequality, spiritual emptiness, pod be resolved a través recovery de ancient wisdom about conscious co-creation, Kapita traditions pioneered. As more people globally access authentic spiritual technologies, as more communities develop sustainable practices baseadas in harmony com natural cycles, as more individuals awaken para their creative potential, possibilities emerge para transformation que seemed impossible from previous levels de consciousness. Future belongs para integration de ancient wisdom com contemporary innovation, traditional spiritual technology com modern scientific understanding, African-originated consciousness principles com global cultural creativity. Question A. Will essa integration happen a través authentic collaboration que honors sources e shares benefits appropriately, or will it happen a través continued appropriation que exploits African wisdom while excluding African peoples from decision-making and prosperity? Answer will determine whether global awakening para consciousness potential becomes force para healing and justice, or becomes another form de cultural colonialism that benefits some while marginalizing others. Comment global unity if you are inspired by the possibility of planetary awakening rooted in authentic appreciation for African spiritual heritage. We have reached the end of this journey of rediscovery, which is, in fact, only the beginning of a transformation that can revolutionize not only your individual understanding of spirituality and creation, but literally transform human civilization through the recovery of our deepest spiritual heritage. What you have discovered about Ta today is not just fascinating history. It is a key to unlocking human potentials that have been deliberately suppressed because they were too powerful for control systems to tolerate. Let's begin by visualizing the transformative impact this rediscovery can have on future generations. Imagine children growing up knowing that their African ancestors developed the first and most sophisticated spiritual technologies humanity has ever known. Imagine what this would do for global self-esteem, for racial healing, for building a society that genuinely celebrates African contributions to human development. Studies in developmental psychology mostram que children que crescem with accurate, empowering narratives sobre their cultural heritage develop greater confidence, greater creativity, greater capacity para positive social engagement. Agora multiply isso por millions de African-descended children globally learning que they carry spiritual DNA de humanity's first masters, de consciousness creation. Mas impact goes beyond African communities. Imagine all children learning que spiritual practices eels might use, meditation, manifestation, energy healing, were gifts para humanity from African innovators. Imagine how ISO would transform racial attitudes, cultural appreciation, and global cooperation. You consider impacting spiritual communities worldwide. Churches, temples, spiritual centers que acknowledge African origins de practices eles use. Healing practitioners que honor sources de techniques they apply. Meditation teachers que educate students about African roots de consciousness work. Entire spiritual industry transforming from appropriation para appreciation, from extraction para collaboration. Practical implications so enormous. African spiritual centers, receiving international support, recognition. African traditional healers gaining access para global networks and resources. African consciousness researchers receiving funding para preserve and develop traditional knowledge. Economic empowerment através spiritual tourism that benefits African communities directly rather than just international companies. Let's think bigger. Imagine entire educational systems transforming para include accurate history de African contributions para human development. Universities establishing departments de African consciousness studies. Medical schools teaching traditional African healing methodologies alongside conventional medicine. Psychology programs incorporating African understanding to consciousness integration therapy. ISO would create generation to professionals qui understand healing, consciousness, human potential from perspectives qui honor traditional wisdom while applying scientific methodology. Mental health treatment qui integrates spiritual awareness. Educational approaches qui develop creative potential alongside analytical thinking. Business practices qui prioritize collective well-being alongside individual success. Consider environmental implications. Pita traditions teach que conscious beings are co-creators come natural world, responsible para maintaining harmony between human activities and ecological balance. Recovery de esses principles could transform how humanity relates para environment, from exploitation para collaboration, from domination para stewardship. Agricultural practices based on consciousness de land as living entity. Urban planning qui incorporates spiritual principles de harmony and balance. Economic systems qui measure success através collective well-being rather than just profit accumulation. Political policies qui consider impacting future generations rather than just immediate benefits. Mas aqui está, where vision becomes revolutionary. Imagine enough humans recovering their understanding to consciousness as creative force para begin deliberately manifesting solutions para problems que currently seem unsolvable. Climate change addressed through mass consciousness application, combined calm practical action. Social inequality transformed through spiritual practices, qui awaken empathy and cooperation. Global conflict resolved through recognition, the fundamental unity underlying apparent diversity. ISO isn't wishful thinking, a logical extension to principles qui Pita traditions taught. When enough conscious beings align their creative intentions, material reality shifts para accommodate those intentions. History shows examples de rapid social transformation occurring quando critical masses de people change their consciousness simultaneously. Abolition to slavery, women's rights, civil rights, ending the apartheid, all represented moments quando enough people shifted consciousness para make previously impossible changes inevitable. Recovery d'État wisdom provides spiritual foundation para next level de collective transformation que could address current planetary crises. Mas transformation requires participation from individuals like você. Your personal commitment para embodying Pita principles in daily life contributes para collective consciousness shift que makes larger changes possible. Your willingness para acknowledge African spiritual contributions changes cultural narratives que have marginalized African wisdom. Your practice de consciousness technologies come ethical intentions adds para collective field de creative energy working para positive transformation. Specific commitments que can amplify transformation. Education yourself continuously about African spiritual traditions. Supporting African spiritual teachers and communities financially through social media promotion. Incorporating acknowledgement the African sources in whatever spiritual practices você use. Using sua platform, however large or small, para educate others about accurate history to consciousness development, mas maybe most important, living as embodiment to consciousness principles que Pita taught, practicing manifestation que serves collective good, approaching healing work as service para justice, treating every interaction as opportunity para recognize creative consciousness expressing itself através another form. Building sustainable practices para maintaining essa transformation através challenges que inevitably arise. Creating community com others que share commitment para authentic spiritual development. Developing daily practices que connect você regularly com wisdom e power de African spiritual heritage. Finding ways para contribute para collective awakening que are sustainable para your individual circumstances. Remember, transformation happens slowly, then suddenly. Individual consciousness shifts, accumulate, until they reach tipping point, on the collective consciousness shifts dramatically. Your personal awakening, para ta wisdom, contributes para collective awakening que could transform entire civilizations. E preparando-se para resistance que will arise como more people discover truth about African spiritual achievements. Systems que built their power in controlling spiritual narratives will fight para maintain those controls. Institutions que benefited from appropriating African wisdom without credit will resist acknowledgement to their cultural debt. Your commitment para truth needs para be stronger than their commitment para comfortable lies. Your dedication para justice needs para be more persistent than their dedication para preserving privilege. Your willingness para embody love needs para be greater than their investment in division. Final question é about legacy. What kind de world você want para leave para future generations? World onde African spiritual wisdom continues para be exploited without recognition? A world onde humanity consciously honors African contributions and collaborates respectfully para develop our shared spiritual potential? A world where consciousness technologies are controlled by institutions that profit from keeping people disempowered? Or a world where spiritual wisdom is freely shared to benefit all life? World on humans continue para see themselves como separate from creative processes que sustain universe. Our world on humans recognize themselves como conscious co-creators responsible para manifesting harmony, justice, a collective flourishing. Your choices about how para integrate Ptah wisdom in your life, how para honor African spiritual heritage, how para embody consciousness principles in daily actions. Essas choices contribute para determining which future becomes reality. Ptah, o first articulator de human spiritual potential, desenvolveu principles que could guide humanity through current challenges, para unprecedented levels de creative collaboration. But those principles only become effective quando they're lived, practiced, embodied per individuals who have courage para claim their heritage como expressions de creative consciousness. The universe is waiting to see what you'll create when you fully remember who you are. The world is waiting to see what humans can accomplish when they recover their understanding of consciousness as a creative force. Future is still waiting para be born through your willingness para embody ancient wisdom in contemporary circumstances. Welcome para movement. Welcome para remembering. Welcome para becoming conscious co-creator in greatest transformation que human species pod attempt. Ptah's legacy lives através your commitment para manifesting love, justice, e creative potential in service de all life. Agora go create world que honors wisdom de our ancestors while serving needs de our descendants. Comment, committed to transformation if you are ready to spend part of your life honoring African spiritual heritage while embodying consciousness principles in service of planetary healing. We've reached the end of this absolutely revolutionary rediscovery, but in truth, this is only the beginning. If you've watched this far, you've demonstrated extraordinary courage in questioning fundamental assumptions about human spiritual development, wisdom in seeking truth even when it challenges everything you thought you knew, and openness in allowing that truth to awaken potentials in yourself that you never knew existed. But watching isn't enough. Knowledge without embodiment is merely entertainment. The question now is, what will you do with what you've rediscovered about your own spiritual heritage? First, if this content awakened something profound in you, if it connected you with the dignity and power of African spiritual ancestry, if it opened your eyes to possibilities you never imagined, hit that like button, not just for the algorithm, but as a declaration that you value truth over convenient lies, empowerment over comfortable limitations, authentic heritage over appropriated spirituality. Second, subscribe e hit notification bell porque essa conversation está just beginning. We've barely scratched surface the African spiritual wisdom que remains para be recovered, explored, e applied para contemporary challenges. E você don't want to miss any opportunity para deepening your connection come this transformative knowledge. But most importantly, leave a comment telling me exactly how this rediscovery of Ptah is going to change how you live. Are you going to incorporate African consciousness technologies into your daily practice? Are you going to educate others about the authentic origins of the spiritual practices they're using? Are you going to support African spiritual communities that preserve these traditions? Are you going to embody Ta's principles of manifestation in service of justice and collective healing? Be specific, be bold, be committed, because sua public declaration and comments isn't just para mí, it's para você. It's sua commitment para honoring wisdom que was nearly lost, para claiming heritage que é sua birthright, para becoming conscious co-creator and greatest transformation human consciousness can attempt. And if you know someone who needs to discover their connection to this ancient wisdom, friend, family member, spiritual seeker, social justice activist, share this video with them. Not to create controversy, but to create awareness. Not to promote African supremacy, but to restore African dignity. Not to divide humanity, but to unite us in recognition of our shared spiritual inheritance. Remember, every great awakening in history started com individuals que had courage para rediscover suppressed truths, e live according para those truths, despite resistance from established powers. Você have opportunity para be one to those individuals, para be part de generation que heals ancient wounds através recovering ancient wisdom. Truth você discovered about Ptah isn't meant para stay hidden in your individual consciousness. It's meant para spread, para inspire, para transform communities and cultures through your willingness, para embody it, share it, live it authentically. So I ask você one final time, will você honor legacy de Ptah através becoming conscious manifester de positive change? Will você allow rediscovery de African spiritual wisdom para awaken creative potential que you've always possessed? Will você help humanity remember its spiritual heritage so we can face current challenges from place de empowerment rather than limitation? Answer você give para those questions will determine not just sua own spiritual journey, mas sua contribution para healing. The wounded world quite desperately needs conscious beings willing para create solutions rather than just complaining about problems. Based on your courage in discovering this truth, based on your willingness to question everything you thought you knew about spiritual origins, I believe your answer will be a powerful affirmation of your commitment to transformation. Welcome para awakening. Welcome para remembering. Welcome para embodying ancient wisdom in service de contemporary healing. Ptah is waiting to see what you'll create. The universe is waiting to see what humans can accomplish when they remember who they truly are. Agora go honor your ancestors. Através becoming conscious creator de world, they would be proud para si.